Hey, well,
Hello, hello, hello.
hello. There we go. We can hear you. How you doing?
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You're a little quiet though. Wow, I don't know if you want to
I can't
speak.
hear anybody yet. Hello?
We can hear you.
All right, I can hear people. I don't know why my camera's not working.
I can give you a second if you want to troubleshoot it. If not,
I mean, it's not
we'll,
necessary. I just was planning on putting it on. So
gotcha. Meta, is that levels good for WoW?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay,
Sounded pretty
cool.
clear. Should I'll be in recording right now.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and start recording. We've got WoW here. I think we have the EPs that can attend here. So what we'll do is get started. So welcome everybody to the discussion. Today's community call will be reviewing the shielded snapshot votes proposal that WoW has made. I'll run through the agenda real quick so we all kind of know what's going to happen, what to expect. First off, just a few rules. We're going to be respectful. We're going to stay on topic, be concise, no interruptions, use the allotted time that has been given, and we'll moderate these to ensure we're adhering to them. So the format is WoW will give you 5 minutes to provide an overview of the proposal, make the case, and then community members can ask questions in the chat, raise their hand to be brought up on stage. If somebody gets brought up on stage and wants to speak, we'll give them about 3 to 4 minutes to speak or ask questions, and we'll try to be a little flexible there. So if a conversation naturally happens, those can extend. We'll have an open mic for EPs that would like to speak on the topic or respond to questions. And we encourage everybody to participate. Whether or not you want to participate with voice or in chat, it's okay. If you want to put messages in the chat, we'll be monitoring that. And then we'll wrap up the call with some closing remarks and next steps, which are taking the community feedback into our group, action based on the feedback and best judgment, and then post the vote to snapshot and then vote. And there's, the timing there is just organizing that with all the other initiatives that we've got going on, but we will get that out and make it happen. So before we get going, Wow, do you have any questions?
no, sir.
Okay. Well, then the floor is yours. You've got 5 minutes, and please go ahead.
All right, guys. I don't really think I need 5 minutes on this. Every single person that's in this audience, the majority of them, I've either had discussions with on Discord or on Twitter. I don't think anything that I'm proposing is revolutionary. I did not create some process. I am simply leveraging the sheer fact there has been data and studies that prove that when you have real-time voting, that there are bias and snowball effects that are a result of it. And, I have seen on Twitter and on Discord the counter arguments that just a few basically, and I don't see how they hold water. And we can talk about them individually or however you guys want to do it. I mean, I feel like I've laid out a pretty strong case. And I did see Vacation post something less than an hour ago. Unfortunately, and he had his own references and citations. Unfortunately, an hour before a community call to get that information is not enough time for me to go and look these all up and find out what their rationale is. But that being said, I took a look and I did respond to some of his comments in the proposal section. And, I really think that on most of these references, they seem to just be at odds with each other. So, if that's the case, then I defer to the community to provide examples of why these do not increase voter engagement. There has been many people that have came out on Twitter and Discord and personally DM me that says, hey, I personally
I lost you there. Wow. Did anybody else lose him?
here.
Yeah, he
Okay, I
cut
can
out.
hear you. I can hear you now. You
Yeah,
were saying about personal DMs. If you want to
no,
start back there.
yeah, and I'm sorry. I haven't tested this setup for this, and I apologize because just a lot going on today.
That's okay.
But so people have reached out on Twitter, on Discord, and in DMs saying that, hey, I experienced this. I've 2 days, 3 days into the vote, I log on, I see that it's 80% in the opposite favor of where I'm voting. So my only hope is to not vote so that quorum isn't met. So I don't understand. I don't get the logic here that somehow real-time votes would increase voter engagement when we have many community members that have came out and said the contrary. So again, I don't think I need 5 minutes here. You guys know what my argument is. I think it's backed in sound science and in research. That being said, the world we live in today, many decisions are made in opposition to sound science and research. So, it's going to be what it's going to be. So, with that, I cede my time, and I would love to hear from the community because I feel like I've said my piece. So, I'm interested to see where this goes.
Gotcha. Thanks. Well, I appreciate that. It does summarize what we've heard so far, and I think that's a good segue for somebody if they want to participate to raise their hand, and we can call you up here and hear from you. Does anybody from the community want to come up to the stage and talk? And you don't have to do that again. If you want to put a question or a comment in the chat, you can do that as well. We can read it out and then speak to it.
Hey guys.
Hey, Warwick. All right. I've got both Warwick and Jer here. So I think, Jer, you raised your hand first. Warwick, if you don't mind waiting. Jer, go ahead.
Oh, I'll be pretty quick. I just dug into all this today, but I remember the initial conversations and threads and stuff I had with WoW and others about this on Twitter. And sorry, my frog on my throat. I've got a bit of a cold I'm getting over. But yeah, I thought I was reading through a lot of the concerns, and I thought Dave raised some points, and others did about transparency. And the only question I had, I was able to answer for myself reading the documents, and I posted this, just in chat as well. I think that transparency is solved as a concern by the very nature of the way it works. Like the shielding happens while voting is occurring, which is just like on election day, you go into the booth, you cast your vote, you don't know how anybody else has voted because all the polls are still open, everything's going on. You might have some hint of like the public trends, but you don't actually have actual counts because by definition nobody started counting yet, right? And then once the voting window is closed, now the ballots are counted and the results are posted and made public for everybody. And the only difference with this is, of course, Web3 governance is everyone's vote is made public when the results are finally tallied. So you know how every single wallet voted, as opposed to, like a general election or whatever, where everybody votes, but everybody's vote is still kept anonymous and you only get aggregate numbers. So I think this is kind of like, feels to me like governance of the future where we're preventing bias, if this proposal goes through shielding by keeping snowball effect and other stuff from happening, by letting people vote purely their own opinion on things and not vote with the majority or vote against the majority or whatever. And then when the window's closed, you get transparency because you see how everybody voted. So if you want to respond to that, if you want to hold people accountable and say, hey, you voted against this thing and I think it's terrible, or for this thing and I think it's wonderful, or whatever, and you want to either praise them, laud them, or harangue them about it, you can still do that because, as much lack of an anonymity that you have, in Web3, if your wallet's, got a address, name associated with it or something, that's your business, or if your wallet's a well-known published one because you're an EP or another prominent person, big collector, whatever, that's going to get known. And I think that adds the accountability maybe people are looking for, while at the same time keeping things veiled. So obviously my bias is clear. I think it's the only sensible thing for me is to do shielded voting. I've always wondered why it was open in the first place. It seemed very naive, in my opinion, of a way of doing voting, because it just allows so much bias from seeing how your friends are voting or seeing how your enemies are voting or whatever as they vote. It just feels weird to me to have that exposed. So anyway, I've said my piece, but just wanted to thank WoW and such for the proposal. It's good to have this up there on the books, and I'm grateful that Snapshot at least gives us the option. So thanks.
I'll
Awesome.
just add one
Well said,
point of clarity.
Chair. Go ahead, Seth.
Just one point of clarity. One of those last things Chair said. The reason why it wasn't shielded in the first place, it's not like it was a conscious choice, from us or the previous cohort. Snapshot has a fairly large monopoly on this, and they only recently added this as an option. So for pretty much all of Web3, we can only do what Snapshot allows us to do at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. And I wasn't criticizing, by the way. I didn't view it as a choice. When I say I wondered why Snapshot didn't provide this as the default from the beginning, was what I was wondering, not why we didn't choose to engage it, so to speak. So just for clarification, there was no criticism there of us or of Echelon. It was all directed at Snapshot. I know that it's standard, but it was like, why is this not a default or at least an option? So anyway, sorry. Thanks for letting me clarify.
Can I say
Understood.
something real quick on that point?
Sure, go ahead.
I just want to agree with what Jerry is saying, is that at no point, I don't want anyone to think the timing of, when this became available. I happened to be in New York City when I saw the clawback vote come up. I just happened to pull it up, and I'm like, oh gosh, I thought we talked about this, and I thought there was some consensus here. It seems logical, so why wasn't it engaged? I'm just talking about from this point forward, the feature is now available, and I think that any project with governance, anytime a new feature set becomes available to them, we should at least have a discussion about implementing it, right? And that's where we are. I'm not speaking to any previous vote. I'm only talking about the fact that this functionality is now available to us, and what is the pros and cons of it, and should we move forward with it? That's no more, no less.
Thanks, Well. That's valuable context. Okay, Warwick, do you want to take that opportunity to speak? I'm just going to put 4 minutes on the clock.
Yep. So first, I would like to say that I am in favor of doing everything with shielding, and I just wanted to ask, like, if we are discussing, if it is a general consensus that we're going to use shielding for the at least the elections, and if we are debating on everything as well, or where are we?
I think we're determining what if everything or if a subset of votes would be shielded. So I think it's an open discussion right now.
So if we put forth a vote, it would also have those two options of like choosing what is shielded besides being shielded or not.
So if you were to state that in the actual voting options, it would be everything shielded, everything unshielded, something unshielded, and something shielded, right? And whatever variation. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, just trying to make sense of like what is the correct way to move forward, like to debate things.
Yeah, let's take that as an open-ended opportunity, because that's what we're discussing. We're discussing how to treat votes, and that's how to treat all votes, proposals as well as elections.
Can I ask a question about on that specific topic? Because I don't understand why what we're voting on has any relevance to the shielding, so why it should be shielded or unshielded. I did see there was a question early on that of around quorum, because someone was saying like, well, how would we know that it's close or not close? And I did do a follow-up. I'm not sure if anybody saw on Twitter or not, from Snapshot's own or from the inside of Snapshot, that does show an example of what it looks like when they have a quorum status bar. So you would be able to see how many votes are in. You would see how far we are from quorum, but you just wouldn't see what the people voted for, which I think is,
Wow, you cut out just there at the end, I believe.
I'll leave it to you guys. I'm gonna try and come back on my phone because this is getting a little annoying. I apologize. My bad, guys.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, so also just wanted to state, if people want to see some details and like information about shielded, I posted some resources in the discussion on under the proposals tab. Just scroll up, you'll find them.
Thanks, Warwick. I appreciate that. Warwick, did you want to continue speaking to that point, or was there anything else that you wanted to? Okay. Yep.
On that train of thought, I was just trying to think about what could be the options. Like it would be like shielded elections, unshielded elections, or like that would be unshielded everything, right? Because if we don't shield elections, then there's no point in shielding anything. So it would probably be shielded elections and unshielded the rest, unshielded everything and shielded everything. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. I feel like we should gather consensus from others. Meta, if you want to go ahead and talk.
I wonder if there's an option on Snapshot to give two choices. So ultimately, we're trying to figure out what is shielded and what's not shielded. Instead of providing like four different permutations, I wonder if we could just do, let's say the first prompt is elections, and you choose between shielded or unshielded, and then the second prompt is proposals, shielded or unshielded. I don't know if Snapshot provides that flexibility, but that would solve our issue with trying to figure out what options, right?
Can I ask? So, like, I know Warwick, you just brought up if we go to a public vote, right? So, can I ask? Under what precedent, or should I say this? Like, does it even make sense that this goes to public, right? Because there has been plenty of discussions that before that the EPs have gathered community feedback and then made a decision themselves without it having to go to the public. Because if I look at all the comments that I've received on Twitter and Discord, I have not received anything to the contrary, except for maybe one person that I can think of. Overwhelmingly, and granted, I'm not a big influencer, I don't have a huge following, but overwhelmingly, the community has came out in support of this. I have gotten pushback, and rightly so. I expect it, steel manning this from EPs and wardens. That's it. So I'm trying to find out at what point does the community's feedback that, hey, we want this, and I see lots of people in chat saying the same things. There's some people that are joining. So does it need to go to a community vote, or do the EPs have the information to make a decision themselves and vote on it? So before we even get to that point that Warwick brings up, so I'd like to hear on that.
I think actually because of the fact that there is some, I think EPs are somewhat undecided internally on this, actually. So I typically when we go to just put forward a motion ourselves, it's because there's unanimous sentiment. But I'm not sure if that's the case here. And I think to your point too, right there hasn't been a massive sample size yet, so it seems like a good type of vote to just run through prime holders. And to your question, Meta, I think likely the best way that we could structure it, because you can select multiple choices instead of just single select would be please choose which options or which types of votes should be shielded. There'd be one option for elections, one option for community votes, and then we could have the third option, which is do nothing slash undecided.
There
And
should
then
probably be both, right? An option for both.
right, so you could select both is what I'm saying, because you can have
Oh,
multiple
okay.
selections.
Okay, sorry, misunderstood.
Is there real value in adding too much choice, because that can kind of split the vote off in multiple ways? It almost feels like maybe there should be either a staggered vote kind of a thing where you could say, okay, well, should we shield at all? Should we ever shield any of our votes, right? And just see what the overall community thought on shielding is, and then once that's known, if the overall community vote is no, we should never shield any votes for any reason, right? Then we can go, okay, well, obviously nobody wants shielding as a majority. And then if we agree that we should shield some or all, right? Then we can go to the next step and say, okay, we've agreed to shield some. So our choices are either, A, B, or A and B, right?
That sounds like a lot of steps.
Well, but it's basically 2 votes. The first vote is to find out whether or not people think shielding is good. The problem with putting all the options in front of everybody at the very beginning is you're just going to get this, I don't know. I feel like you're going to get this sea of votes all over the map. And it's a bit like having in America, you look at like the presidential elections. Every time there's a third party, even if it seems like they're going to stand a chance, they're one that basically pulled votes away from either party A or party B, because the third party just has never had any viability. So I'm just kind of worried that we're going to run into a similar thing, or you're going to kind of get these weird limping results, right?
Okay, but let's unpack that for a second, Jerry. Can you explain a situation, or anybody, where what we're voting on, what does it matter what we're voting on if it's shielded or not shielded? I can't think of a scenario that makes sense that okay, well, it makes sense to shield EP voting process, but it doesn't make sense to shield the clawback. If anything, I think there's enough evidence based on what people are saying, myself included, that I did not vote in the clawback vote because I had hoped that it wouldn't reach quorum. So I don't understand how, I've heard people come out and say, well, I think it makes sense for the EP vote, but I don't think it makes sense for proposals. Well, there seems to be people that have examples, such as myself, where we didn't vote because we hoped it didn't get quorum. So what are we trying to promote here?
That's a great question, and just so my bias is clear. Also, my head's not super, a little foggy today, just with the cold. But so might be muddling my words a little. But my bias is that we should shield everything, just period. And I think the simplest vote is to say, should we shield or not shield, and that should be the end of it. But I'm saying if we want to go nuanced, I don't think the first vote should have. Sorry, Jamari, what was that?
Oh, I would say I concur.
Yeah. No, I was saying is I was trying to keep it simple. Stupid was kind of the thing. Not calling anyone here stupid, just the royal us. But trying to play the KISS principle on this and say shield, no shield. That's the vote, right? And everything is shielded. That would be my bias. But if people want to get nuance, then I think first we have the should we ever shield anything vote. Shield or no shield. And if we agree on shielding, later we can do refinements where people are like, oh, well, blah, 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 I think we should unshield this. That could be a second stage vote. Maybe after we do a few votes, let's say we say shield, go forward with it. We do a few votes, shield it for whatever happens to be the next few things we vote on, proposals, candidates, whatever. If the community at that point has feedback, having tasted and seen the other side of it, that they want more nuance, then that can be put as a secondary proposal. And that's kind of what I was trying to play out, right? As a second vote to say, oh, we should just shield these kinds of votes, or we should unshield these kinds of votes at that point, right?
Thanks, Jared. I wanted to just give somebody else an opportunity to talk, as well as note that I think that's a good idea. Also, from a voting perspective, back to a question of, should we vote or should we not? vote, should EPs do the voting or should the community do the voting, there are benefits to doing community votes that just in general that help the ecosystem. And so there's value there in providing that opportunity for the community to participate. And that would be one of the reasons why we would want the community's participation, not just to mention, getting their opinion and making sure that it is noted and marked on the blockchain. Go ahead, Jamari. I see you unmuted.
Yes, absolutely. Pleasure. It's a good day, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to contribute to this conversation about should the snapshot votes. For me, I was really excited when I saw this. I'm a big my actual expertise is in governance, so the move towards being able to provide mechanisms for people to be able to vote in a way that that removes some of the initial pressure about what they're voting for, and the disconnects. That is actually an important part of voting processes in general. That's why privacy votes exist across the world without exposing it to everybody, until you get to levels of like the higher transparency when we get to like republics and things of that nature. So I'm glad this vote came to the forefront. When I was hearing you guys talk, one of the things that actually stood out to me was kind of like about process, about between kind of that council committee level versus kind of the overall holder voting. And one thing I think about that is like it really comes down to me about process. And I'm glad the process is allowing the community to contribute to that conversation. But I do think over time it's about voting to make sure that you empower the council to vote on the aspects that they might not have enough expertise on, right? Because this idea of shielded snapshot voting is really at the end of the day, it becomes a technical one. I think about how consensus is made and then the impact of consensus. And the things of that nature, I do think eventually should be like in the purview under like kind of that initial smaller group of people that have done the research, evaluated the options and what its significance is as an infrastructure piece of governance, because it's actually a fundamental piece of infrastructure that impacts things in long term. And we talk about bias voting and things of that nature. I think those are really research qualitative things that you can make the decisions on from a technical perspective primarily, and can have a lot of sway by just kind of influencing aspects a lot of time. And that's really was my only concern in this conversation, is making sure that this kind of conversation is founded on the facts of what it delivers and then the outcomes, versus how it makes somebody feel about it. But yeah, so I'm clearly for it. But I'm into process, and that's why I was just kind of thinking about, okay, how does this fit into the overall infrastructure of how our infrastructure of governance works? Because I don't think all things infrastructure-wise should be voted by everybody. Sometimes it's helpful by just having a ratification of a suite of things. And I think this was one of those things I would think that would fall under that, is like saying, hey, the committee or somebody is bringing this forward as a viable option based on this, yay or nay in general. That was my thought process. Sorry for long speech, but
No problem. You're well within your time, and well said. I see a lot of comments in the chat. It looks like there are a lot of folks that are supporting Shielded. In terms of additional speakers, does anybody else want to come up and discuss? Seems like we're gathering some good feedback from the folks that are here in attendance.
Can I just ask something?
Sure.
So you said there was no consensus around this subject amongst EPs. Can some of the EPs that are against this make their claims if they're here?
I'll speak here. I'm not really necessarily against this. I'm sort of in between, and I'm perfectly happy going with whatever the consensus is, and not going to vote against it, or either way. But it's I don't know. Maybe I'm stuck in the Web 2 world. Maybe I'm too old and crotchety. I just find this all a little bit naive. I think what's going to happen is that the average person isn't going to be able to see the results, and maybe that matters and it won't influence them. But uh, I do think it's quite naive to assume that there isn't going to be just as much conversation on the back end. There won't be private conversations. There won't be discussions even in the chat. And if I'm being honest, I think this will probably have at most like a 20% level effect. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's worth it. I'm not saying it's not worth it. I just would caution people against thinking that this is some panacea that will fix all that ails the human condition when it comes to electing, positions of leadership.
Hey, Seth, can I say I 110% agree with you? But in poker, it's all about the edges, right? And a 5 or 6% edge in poker is the world, okay? And I think that over time, if you say it's maybe has a 20% impact, that's a big edge, okay? And I don't disagree with you that whatever is going on at a certain level is going on privately. I get that. But if we look at this just from like the single scenario, which is like if I see a vote that is going against me, and the only way I feel that I can impact that is by not voting so that it doesn't hit quorum, that's a problem. And so if we're looking at this from like trying to be the best governance body that we can possibly be, we need to eliminate the edges, and we need to eliminate whether it's small or not. When you optimize code in the beginning, you got bugs everywhere, right? And you knock one out, and that eliminates a big thing. But eventually, you're getting down to the edge cases, and you're just slowly, smoothly polishing the process. And what I'm saying is that there is evidence based on research that being able to see the vote has a couple of negative knock-on effects. Okay, I don't understand why this is so contentious. I really don't. So with that, I'll. But that's my response to you. I agree with you 100% and 10%. But as a governing body, shouldn't you be slowly eroding those edges to be the most optimal governance process that you can possibly be? So when you say 20%, that scares me, because I thought it was even less than that, to be honest.
Can I say something?
Sure.
So you said that people collude outside, and that you could call it collude, or just share opinions and agree on, like, group themselves to vote on a particular option, right? And that's gonna happen regardless. I think that's the shielded is not gonna it's not gonna take that away, and I think that's a normal thing. It happens even in traditional elections. But I think it's more of reducing the information that people have, so people, it pushes people to first to be more engaged with the echelon governance process, because they have to form an opinion, at least to vote on something. And I think it's about that. It's about reducing the amount of information that people have, and also that increases the difficulty of collusion, of like people, uh, of because for people to collude, they have to talk to each other, right? Instead of just checking the chain and seeing, oh, this guy voted for this, so I'm gonna vote. You know.
Um, can I ask a question? Sorry. Can you
Sure,
guys
go
hear me
ahead,
well?
Dan. Yep, can
Okay,
hear you
cool.
good. Yep.
Yeah, right. So, Warwick, just a question about what you said. And I was reading the text that you sent in the chat as well about, voters being uninformed, and like you said, removing that information part. Do we have any kind of evidence to say that, Firstly, are we presuming on their part that they're uninformed just because they're voting a certain way? And B, if and you also said that people don't care about governance, and there's already this issue about trying to get people to vote for things. Do you think that by not letting them see anything, are we actually encouraging them to find out about those things and vote? Like, would they take that another a very extra step to actually come back informed and vote, or would they just leave and not vote at all? Because it seems that people are okay not voting, right? So if they can't even see, like you said, you're removing information. So when you remove information, you're assuming that they will be motivated to gain that information, which I personally think is unlikely. But if there is anything that backs that, supports that, I'd love to hear that about that too.
No, I'm saying removing information in the sense of the live voting results, not information of what the option entails, or like what is this option going to do and what is this option going to do. No, that's part of being in Echelon Discord, and the engagement in the Discord is very small. Like you, and that's what I mean when I say people don't care about governance. You know,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you can
right.
see the
Yeah,
engagement in the Discord. It's not great, right?
right,
And
right.
that's what I'm
No,
saying.
right. No, I understand that. What I mean is, let's say we're saying that people can't see uh, the votes, and their uninformed opinion, like you said, does not then come into play because they cannot follow anybody else, right? I mean, that seems to be a running point here. I'm just thinking, do we know that by doing this, we are actually encouraging them to go find out more about what they want to do and vote, or will they just leave? And if they will just leave, are we okay with them just not voting? Do we want these people who come in and actually vote,
Yeah,
even though we may presume they're uninformed, we want them to not vote at all and leave?
yes, absolutely. Like it's not guaranteed that because of shielding the vote, it's gonna make people to go out there and inform themselves to vote for the best option that they think. Absolutely, that's probably not gonna happen. It's it's just I lost my train of thought. What was
Well,
it?
Warwick, let me quick jump in here just because I think
Go ahead.
I can at least speak to this. I know Nine was directed at Warwick, but if I say I'm a community member and I have some I just know that the vote's going on and my gut is having me lean kind of one, maybe like 55-45 in one direction, right? But then I log into Snapshot and I see, oh wow, everybody's thinking the opposite of what I'm thinking. So, they must know something I'm not. I'm just going to vote that way, right? So, I don't want to say that people are uninformed. I'm saying it forces them to have to make their own choices based on whatever limited information they do have. Okay, and on kind of as a follow up to this is that an analogy I posted earlier is that if I'm a student at college and I didn't study for a test and I show up and I take the test, but underneath my chair happens to be all the answers to the test, and I put all the correct answers and I get 100%. What You're not only cheating yourself because you're not learning anything. When you go out and get into the workplace and you're saying I got a PhD in something, but you cheated your way to get there, what value do you add to the community, right? So I think it's a little disingenuous to say that people are uninformed. I don't think people are uninformed. I think that people they might not do a lot of research.
I have a question for those who have read the literature or think they have knowledge of this maybe. In the absence of the information that is currently given, which is the names and the ranking, um, as we have it now, the unshielded, and assuming that, as Nan and Warwick have both discussed, that there will be uninformed voters. Sorry, my watch is pinging like crazy. There will be uninformed voters who have low interaction in the Discord and no incentive to educate themselves in a meaningful way. Does there then become a bias of I must vote because voting will probably be considered for an airdrop, so I'm going to just pick the first name in the list, vote, and leave again for the next 6 months? And the reason I ask this is because you do see this in other projects where people know that they can farm airdrops via voting. Uh, like right now, one would be the Stargate protocol, which is a ZK bridge, and they have weekly votes, and it really is a lot of people just coming, at least from talking to people who I know are voting for farming these airdrops. They just go and they just pick the first option. They don't read the question. They don't give a shit, anything like that. So I guess I wonder if this just introduces another level of bias where maybe like the first 2 or 3 in the list have some implicit advantage due to a lack of perfect information.
Wow, I didn't know if you had anything else to add there, but wanted to give you an opportunity to respond or at least conclude your point.
I mean, I think that the time in which the studies that I read took place, blockchain was not a thing, right? And I do agree that there are nuances that blockchain has that traditional voting doesn't. But is the juice worth the squeeze, Saf? I mean, you're making an assumption that a voter just assumes that because other projects provide some kind of airdrop to garner voter participation, that all projects do, and that those people will then apply that logic to Parallel without doing any research. So I think we're talking edge cases here, but it's, I guess, it's something to think about. I haven't heard that come up yet, but I'm not a farmer. I don't swim in those circles. So, but at no point has Parallel or Echelon ever kind of enabled that behavior. So I think for them to mindlessly come to our community and then vote to assume that they would be eligible for something down the line, I think we're just talking what ifs at this point.
So my only point to that would be that since we're discussing uninformed voters who are not in touch with the community, I would say that we're dealing with the sample set of people who fall under the ability to be that absent-minded or be that uncaring or whatever. And you're right, it is a what if. But since we are discussing potential changes to voting, maybe snapshot, does snapshot have an option where every time you reload the page, it randomizes the order of the voting options? Because something like that would eliminate this implicit bias entirely, right?
Yeah, possibly. And I want to make something clear. I have never, at least I don't think I have, came out and characterized anybody as an uninformed voter. To me, I think that each person has a spectrum of information, and they are going to make their choices based on whatever, small sliver of information they have, all the way up to hours and days worth of research. Okay, I just think that we should allow people to be able to make their choices with whatever subset of that spectrum of information that they have. Okay, so I don't think calling anyone uninformed, at least please don't put that in my, I'm not saying that. Okay, I know some other people have said things along those lines, but that's not what I'm saying.
I don't think that's a problem at all. Like, you can tell that if someone is participating in Echelon or not. Like, you can see, like, some people are not even in the Discord. You can depends on what you think it's uninformed. Like, some people are more informed than others, but I don't think it should be an offense to someone, to be honest. At least I don't see it as that. If someone is offended because I say they are uninformed, maybe. I'm uninformed in a lot of things, and I don't take it as an offense.
That's fair. Go ahead. Sorry, I cut somebody off. I think it's
No, I just okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for being here too. It's been awesome hearing everyone's thoughts so far on this. I saw somebody mention it was work in chat mentioning I think the focus should be increasing governance participation. I'm not sure I heard that anybody or WoW or anybody else was really honing in on like whether or not this is what the impact is going to be here. on participation in voting. That's kind of like, I would say, my biggest concern with implementing something like this. Just, the adoption of shielded voting, not being there yet, with it being kind of a new thing that Snapchat's offering. Who knows that who knows what it will do, right? Is that gonna lead to increased voter turnout, or is it gonna actually, you know, weaken it? So it could really create its own set of own new issues that we don't have right now by implementing something like this.
I mean, you might not have heard my comment before, Ultra, but I did address this directly. So, in the example, which I have heard not just myself, but many people on Twitter and in Discord bring up, is that I showed up to the reclaw vote a couple of days late. I saw that it was already at, like, I don't know, 70, 80% in the opposite of where I wanted it to be, or where my vote landed. And so I chose not to vote, because my only hope was that it wouldn't reach quorum. Okay, this is an example that has came up multiple times. I didn't even bring it up. Okay, but it is an example that of a case where real-time voting does lead to less engagement. Okay, so I don't know how much clearer that could, of an example that is. If you want to engage the community, if I don't see what the vote is and I hit no, I still feel like on day 7 I hit no. I still feel like my vote could count for something. It might not be. It might be 99% against me. I don't know. But I'm throwing my vote in the ring, right? And so for a real-time vote, that's not the case. I'm going to try and hope that it doesn't reach quorum. And so if that's happening and there's other like-minded people like me who are not voting, the only thing you're going to see is that vote continue to get more skewed, because the people who are voting yes are seeing that, hey, I'm winning. I'm going to keep, hammering on that yes button. And so then all of a sudden it's just out of whack. And so that is 100% active example that I've heard people say. I have not heard any other theories about how this would cause less engagement. I'm open to hearing them.
No, I think you make a good point there. It definitely happened recently. I don't know who it was. They were saying like, oh yeah, we're not going to vote because it's not going to reach quorum if we don't vote, right? That's not good. I still think like there's the unknown too, right? I wasn't specifically talking about like those kinds of people who the vote's not going their way, so they're not voting, but we just have like that unknown representation of we've talked about this, like are people uninformed? Are they kind of waiting to see what other people are doing? I mean, they're still going to talk to the people, so maybe it's not an issue. Maybe it won't increase or decrease. It just seems yeah.
I just don't know if we should be making governance process based around the unknown. I mean, I don't see that as logical.
I think your concern is more like, oh, people don't see the live voting happen, so it's less engaging, right? And that could deter people from voting, like, oh, it's shielded, I don't see anything, so I don't care about it. But what is the alternative? Is just having people bandwagon off the number one option? Is that a better way to do things?
No, Warwick, they do see data. They will see the number of votes cast, and they will see the percentage that is needed to reach quorum. So they will see engagement. It's not that this is completely.
Yeah, but I don't think it's not the same in the same way. Yeah, there is that, but I don't think it's the same way as in seeing what is winning and what's not. But I don't think that's a problem, and that shouldn't be a way. I don't think that's a valid reason not to adopt shielding.
Okay, guys, we're coming up with 10 minutes left on the call. Wanted to try to wrap things up, work on next steps, and talk about how we're going to operationalize this. So with that,
Sean,
I think.
Sean,
Go ahead, Nan.
sorry, can I have 1 extra minute? Just
Sure.
want to address a closing thing. Firstly, I appreciate how we're approaching this in a really holistic manner. I really like that these governance matters have so many philosophical and behavioral implications, It's really interesting to explore. I'm completely in agreement with the fact that we should explore them as new options and things come on the horizon. So I really appreciate WoW bringing this out for us to discuss. Um, so I'm just thinking from a legal perspective, also like a legal mind, not a legal law perspective, just a legal mind where I try to avoid absolutes. So what I will say in the end, my just two things are, one thing is that are we the proposers of this change of the view that this is an absolute solution, or are we open to evaluating it? And if we are open to evaluating it, what kind of results in the future will affirm this choice or promote a return to open voting or any other form of voting? So I think I would like to maybe formalize that a little bit. Because also the fact is, it is true that, so the people who abstained from voting, like Val said, so many people contacted him and they said they didn't vote because the option that was the dominant option was not the one that they wanted to vote for, and they abstained from voting. It may very well be that these people are actually countered by the fact that when people see nothing, and they cannot really they're not as invested in the ecosystem, let's say, and like Warwick said, they don't have, they're just bandwagoning. These people might just not vote at all, right? There is a possibility that they don't vote. They can't because they don't know what's happening in the vote. They might just decide it's too much for them to care so much and they don't vote. It might be that these two groups of people are countered by each other too. So like I said, are the proposers of the view that this is an absolute solution and then we never reevaluate it? And if we do evaluate it, what kind of results and numbers and metrics will affirm or cause a change in this? Thank you.
I think this is ever evolving process, and I think we are always adapting, right? And you guys know this better than anyone. So I think this is not an absolute at all.
It's fair. Well, thanks for raising that, Nan. And then I believe that Warwick well said. Like we're working this. It's a process, as many things are. We're in a new space. We're kind of forging new frontier here. Wow, I see you unmuted. Go ahead. Just 1 minute, please.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, I am of the belief that, we talk about like scientific principles, right? That they're true all the way up until the point that new data comes out that makes them not true or makes, we add to the theory or what have you. So nothing in my mind is ever an absolute, in that it's as new data comes out that we reevaluate it. So no, I do not believe in absolutes. I don't think that this proposal should, or any proposal should be viewed as an absolute. If data comes out after doing 4 or 5 of these votes that is, that we didn't expect, then we review it. Okay, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank you for putting forth this proposal, and thank you for attending and being here. Not just you, Wow, but everybody else in the community. So with that, I think we need to discuss kind of next steps. Summarizing what I heard in this call, I believe the desire of those in attendance is that this is a community call. I believe the EPs are in alignment with that. We'll need to double check, but I believe that's where we're at. And I think the desire from the community is that we have 3 options. One is all votes shielded, all votes unshielded, or abstain.
Sounds good.
I'm just checking the chat. Okay. Any other EP, would you like to correct me there or modify that statement?
That sounds right. One quick thing I wanted to touch on is that, to your point, Warwick, about I'm blanking. My brain's not working. In terms of participation and transparency, what brought me over the edge was the fact that you can see quorum, because that was my main concern. But you raised that portion on the fact that quorum will still be visible, and so we're not going to have a situation where we missed it by 5 votes just because we were unaware. That was for me what was convincing, and I think that kind of alleviated any hesitations that I had personally. But excited to see where this goes. And again, Sean, I think you captured the options correctly.
Awesome. Thanks, Cold. All right, folks, we did it. We had a community call under the time allotted. So congratulations. We're all winners, as we will continue to be. Thanks, everybody, for your participation and contributions, and I look forward to moving to the next steps here.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks, guys.